having different types of, do you feel that's kind of helped you kind of differentiate what you're writing in terms of like based on a pen name? Because it just feels like, for me, I like you like many genres and everything else, but it just feels like using one name kind of kind of just make it a little confusing a little bit for the reader if
Mhm.
they're expecting one thing to give it another thing. Does that kind of what your mindset was like for that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome to the Daylos Diaries.
And readers are smart when they want to be. I mean, they can, if they're not paying attention, they're kind of dumb, right? But we all
Hmm.
are. But when they're paying attention, they're smart. But the real challenge today, as you well know, is getting noticed, right? And so people they gloss over pretty quickly. And if they want crime fiction and they pick up your crime fiction book thinking it's going to be and then it isn't, that's a bad thing for the relationship. If they're looking for whatever it is you're writing and they see the name that's associated with crime fiction, they might skip right over it and not read the science fiction because they're thinking you're writing a police story or something. And so I felt like it would be clear to readers and it would keep people from being dissatisfied. I never want somebody to pick up a book that wants one thing and gets something completely different, because they're never going to go away happy. And as you know, nobody ever writes about how unhappy they are on the internet.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that works out, right? Just overall, just when you came to, you mentioned your crime stories. Are they influenced by like stuff that you encountered as a police officer, or you just come up with them based on the scenarios that you were running into?
yeah, definitely. I made a real strong effort to hardly ever, almost never, have a one-to-one sort of equation where this happened and I wrote about it like it happened. And so instead of taking like a whole big incident or a whole big case or even a single scene and transplanting it, and slightly fictionalizing it, more what I did was I plucked little tiny details from here and little tiny sentences somebody might have said from here and an attitude that a criminal had from over here. And because it was almost like going through the buffet line instead of ordering a meal, right? So by the time you get back to the table, it doesn't look anything like, any one of those things. It's something completely different. But there's inspiration from how this cop carried himself, or how this guy committed this crime, or how this witness remembered an important fact, or things like that. And then of course there's the things that you experience. I mean, if you've never been inside a police car, you don't know what it smells like, and it has a smell. So it's not necessarily unpleasant or anything, but it has a specific, sensory
Hmm.
input to it. What it sounds like to be in a police car and so forth. And so I definitely drew on those experiences pretty heavily. And I was fortunate too, because I spent about the first half of my career doing the job. So I was a police officer, I was a field training officer, I was a detective, I was a corporal. And so I got to experience the boots on the ground, heavy lifting of those particular jobs. And then about halfway through my career, I became a sergeant and moved into leadership positions. And a lot of the units and people that I had command of in the leadership phase of my career were things I never did as a line officer. So I got to be the canine unit commander. I was never a canine handler. So I learned a lot about the dogs and got to see them in action. And so that is something I've been able to bring into my writing with a little bit of authority, compared to if I had never gone in, never been the commander. Same thing with SWAT, same thing with a few other positions. And so I don't want to say I know more than I should, but I'm familiar with way more than I would have been
Yeah.
if I had worked in one job the whole time. So that's been very fortunate.
So how much research do you do before you start writing? Is it one of those things where you have to research a ton, or when you're writing a crime procedural, or is it one of those you just know what you're doing?
Not a ton of research for the police work. The stories that have to do with that, which several of my, it's like 5 or 6 of my series are in that general crime fiction genre, and I usually don't have to research much of anything, at least not to get rolling. I may occasionally come by something